All right, welcome in. It is Monday, October 9th, Bears Nation podcast. Myself, Jake Hassan, joined by Kevin Lapka as always. And it's been a little bit since we talked to everybody because the Bears played a game on Thursday Night Football last week. And now here we are in our usual Monday spot to talk about that game, even though it feels like it was a lot longer than it was. It's where we're at. I don't know. I got no easy segue out of that, so we're just going to keep it moving here. But the Bears actually won a football game for the first time in almost a year. The Chicago Bears have won an NFL football game. And I know that Kevin Lapka is going to have so much to say because he texted me, when are we talking about this? When are we doing this lit podcast? I think is what the exact words were. So Kevin, the floor is yours to talk about your baby boy, Justin Fields, and the Chicago Bears, who are back in the win column for the first time in almost a year.
We're here. We're back. He's here. He's back. We're so far back right now. It's not even funny. Like you could not be more back than the Chicago Bears are right now. Caleb Williams talk off the board. It's not happening. Justin Fields is the quarterback of this team. DJ Moore is him. What a performance, Jake. I was on cloud 9 on Thursday night, and rightfully so. So were you. So was every Bears fan across the country, because it wasn't just the first win in 347 days, almost a year. It was a dominating win, Jake. Dominating. I mean, they controlled the entire game. We thought for a split second in the third quarter they were going to pull a week 4 against the Broncos. It crossed my mind in the third quarter, but the defense gets a takeaway. Terrell Smith gets that forced fumble. They end up scoring on that drive and kind of put the game out of reach. And just like everything that we talked about in the offseason about what we believe this team could be and the additions that we made and how that would be reflected on the field, it all came together this week. Every single thing that we talked about. And this performance was like a complete antithesis of what the first 4 weeks of the Chicago Bears were. And I tweeted that out. I mean, explosive offense, disciplined football, defense getting takeaways and getting after the ball and stopping the run. It was just like everything came together. But let's start offensively. Let's start with Justin Fields. We're like, Jake, Caleb Williams is out of the question. Drafting a quarterback is out of the question. We're at that point. We have seen, he still has to have a strong next 12 games, 100%. But at this given moment, this is your quarterback who's going to be, this is the quarterback we thought we would see for the next 10 years. This is the quarterback that we thought would transcend this franchise. This is the quarterback who's going to be the first 4,000-yard passer and all these different things. He's 3rd in the league in passing touchdowns at this moment. He's like 14th in the league in passing yards, which is just even incredible that he's that high up after the first 3 weeks of the season. This is the Justin Fields that I expected to see when he was drafted out of Ohio State. And we are finally seeing it. And we talked about, hey, build confidence. He built confidence in that Denver game. Can you compound on it? Can you build off of it? Because we've seen in the past in his career, he's had a good game, but he maybe doesn't build on it, maybe doesn't compound it. This was back-to-back games of 4+ touchdowns, 280+ yards. I mean, everything was just in motion. We talked about DJ Moore being the A.J. Brown, being the Stephon Diggs to Justin Fields. He's proven to be that. 8 receptions, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Just one of the most prolific receiving performances, probably the most prolific receiving performance in Bears history. And it's probably not even close when you factor in the touchdowns. It was the second most yards in a game by a Bears player, second to Alshon Jeffrey, who I believe 240 something. So DJ Moore got close, but those 3 touchdowns, I mean, those win you the game. I believe the only people that caught passes in that game were DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and Robert Tonyan. The only 3 players that caught passes for the Bears in that game. Unbelievable, but just a culmination of everything that we had expected from the offseason. I don't believe Eberflus is still going to be the coach. We're not there yet. He's not going to be the coach of the team next year. I'm not all in on him. But when it comes to Justin Fields and when it comes to quieting the noise about what the Bears are going to do in the future with the number 1 overall pick that they still have because of Carolina, at this moment, Jake, and I know you'll probably disagree with this, at this moment, you cannot take Caleb Williams. You cannot do it. Justin Fields is your quarterback of the future, and he's proved it the past couple weeks. So I am so happy for him, and I'm hyped.
Yeah, so usually this would be the point where I come in and completely just tear down everything that Kevin said and go the complete opposite. I actually agree. I actually think, and I said this last week, like I am open to the possibility of Justin Fields being the quarterback of this team going forward. And I said all that I would need to see is these continued performances of not even excellence, but really good, above average, high level quarterbacking. And that's what he did. I have no bad things to say about Justin Fields. I mean, sure, you could nitpick a couple throws where maybe he overthrew Darnell Mooney, find the exact spot, and they didn't come down with a catch. That's fine for the most part, because what he did do overshadows that for once. What Justin Fields was able to do, and I said this last week, I wanted to see more of like the third, whatever it was, the third or fourth touchdown throw against Denver when he's moving around in the pocket. He's dancing around. He's got his eyes moving, and he fires a touchdown in the end zone. I think it was Cole Kmet's second touchdown of the day. It was the fourth touchdown in that Denver game. And I continued to see that. He continued to move. He continued to roll. It was the Justin Fields that we were sold. Once again, we saw that guy. We saw, I mean, he was putting throws where only DJ Moore, for the most part, could get them. I mean, the second touchdown to DJ Moore, where he goes up and high points it for basically on the other side of the defender's helmet, it basically mosses him. And then I think the third touchdown, which was perfectly placed between two Washington defenders. It was a really high level throw. I thought it was a really difficult throw, one that we're not accustomed to him making, and he made them. So even though there were some mistakes, and not every quarterback is going to be perfect,
Never.
but what he did overshadowed those mistakes. And you figure that as time goes on, and if this continues, the one step overthrow of Darnell Mooney isn't going to happen next time, or the throw that's a little bit too close to the defender and they're able to get a hand on it isn't going to happen next time, because what he did do was put enough throws for me where only his receivers, again, mostly DJ Moore, could get them, that it worked out. And DJ Moore is an unbelievable talent. You saw it. I mean, when he and of course, and the Washington defense, especially the last touchdown, DJ Moore, his third touchdown, was a little bit like Washington defense, like trying to make a play, have to try and make something. They gambled, they lost, and DJ Moore was able to just stroll into the end zone. But still, I mean, it was an all-encompassing performance from Justin Fields, and really what I was looking for. Now, you have Vegas and Minnesota coming up, two of the worst passing defenses in the league. Can you keep it up? And that's what's going to be the next question that has to be answered. You have some really weak opponents upcoming, and we'll get into that, especially on Wednesday. But can you keep it up? And so far, I'm encouraged. Like you said, this isn't something we usually see from him. It's usually one step forward, two steps back. This was one step forward and then another step forward the following week, which is something that we haven't seen a lot with Justin Fields in his career in Chicago. So it's definitely encouraging. It's definitely what we were looking for. And I agree with you. As of this moment, October 9th, 11:10 a.m. Chicago time, I'm willing to say that Justin Fields is the quarterback of this team going forward. Could that change over the next 12 weeks? Yeah, of course. But as of right now, I'm willing to say that, and willing to say, all right, you have that Carolina pick at 1. Somebody's going to be desperate for Caleb Williams. You trade back to 2 or 3 or wherever, and maybe you're still in the top 10. Maybe you're not, depending on, how you handle these upcoming games. But ideally, you trade back to 2 and you still get a Marvin Harrison Jr. for Justin Fields or offensive lineman or whatever it may be. You get something, and you're able to make out like bandits again, hopefully.
I didn't think you would get to this point this soon. I really didn't. I thought it was going to take a lot longer for you to be back on the Justin Fields train and be out of the Caleb Williams, sweepstakes and whatever.
Again, I said this last week. I said I still remain that I insist on keeping that same mindset. I'm open to it. As of right now, this moment, season ends today. Yeah, Justin Fields is probably your quarterback going forward. But could that change the other way too? 100%. If Justin Fields goes out there in the next 2 weeks, especially if he puts up a clunker against Vegas or Minnesota, then I'm probably coming back the other way, because those are two really bad defenses. But so far, he's had 2 tests. I mean, one was against a truly terrible, truly atrocious Vance Joseph defense in Denver. But it was a good launch point. It was a good jumping off point for Justin Fields. Now you had a little bit stiffer competition in Washington's defense, which still isn't great. We talked about that, but they're a little bit closer to average than, the atrocity that is Denver's defense. So you have continued tests coming up. Can you continue to stack these performances?
Yeah, and I think it was so critical for me, and I think for them, for the team, to do what they did in a primetime stage, right? Like for me, that was a really important element to this, because we know these guys are on Twitter. Like, these guys are aware of what people say about their team. Like, I know, like, people say that they don't these guys are aware. Trust me. The players and the coaches and the organization is aware of the narrative around the Chicago Bears. And the narrative around the team going into that game was, you're an embarrassment. You are the worst team in the NFL by far. It's not a question. There's no debate who it is. You just lost to the Broncos. And in a primetime spot with the whole world watching, the entire national media, the entire country watching, and to put the performance that they put on in front of the entire country, like, that is just such the confidence booster that they needed, not just for the Justin Fields, but for the entire team. Like, the guys on defense, the guys, the undrafted rookies and the rookies from the, 6th and 7th round, like Terrell Smith, who are coming into play, like all these guys who had been exposed the first 4 weeks of the season, who thought that, they're going to be nothing in the NFL. And then they show up on one primetime game. Like, this is one of those games that I almost don't want to say this, because I thought the same way last year about the Patriots game when they embarrassed the Patriots on Monday Night Football, and there was a lot of the same things. So, wow, this was unexpected, and Justin Fields played really well, but Fields played even better against the Commanders than he did versus the Patriots on Monday night. This is one of those games where you have the ability now to rattle off a couple of wins. Like, you're coming off of 10 days of rest, right? You got a lot of guys you need to get healthy. You got Jalen Johnson coming back. Kyler Gordon should be reactivated off IR and eligible to play this week, and all these different things. This is one of those games where you could rattle off 4 in a row and then look back at this and be like, this is where it all started. This is the game that was just the nucleus of what is going to be, a potential turnaround season for the Chicago Bears. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself and say they're going to make the playoffs. I don't want to get too ahead of myself and say they're going to rattle off 4 in a row. But the bottom line is, it's available to you now, because you do play a very bad Minnesota Vikings team that's on the verge of implosion at 1-4. A probable 1-4 Raiders team after they play the Packers tonight on Monday night. We just don't know. But regardless, whether they're 2-3 or 1-4, they're not a good football team. And then I believe after that, you do play the Chargers and then the Saints. So then you could be 3-4, right? You could be 3-4 walking in to SoFi Stadium on the Halloween weekend, and with a chance to get to 500 against a good team. And then that's the point where you win that game and it's like, oh shit, we're here now. So this was just a huge moment for this organization, for this franchise, for Justin Fields, because you lose this game. Like, we already talked about rock bottom. Like, we were there already after the Denver game. But you lose that game, I still think if they lose that game, Eberflus gets fired. And I still think he will get fired at the end of the year. But if you lose that game, you are talking about organizational collapse. Like, at that point, is right. Justin Fields' career over? At that point, is Eberflus's career over? Is Getsy gone? Is Poles' job in question, right? Like, this was a franchise-saving game for a lot of the players on this team and for a lot of the people in that organization. So no better time for it to happen on Thursday Night Football. But I know you're probably going to get mad at me too about talking about the future of this team for the next couple of games. But the bottom line is, it's available to you. And if they build off of this and they get a little bit healthier, there's no reason they can't be 3-4 going into Sunday Night Football.
No, I do. I actually agree with you. And even if you lose that game against the Chargers, you immediately have the Saints and the Panthers, who are especially the Panthers are an atrocious team. The Saints are very beatable as well. So even if you do lose that Chargers game, you'll still have a shot at 5-5, which is really, a far cry from, in a good way, from where you thought you were going to be even just a week ago. And like you said, an organization that was on the brink of implosion, of collapse, and they're able to get away from it. They're able to beat a team. And really, I think, and I talked about this and I tweeted this, like, that third quarter, I was waiting for them to blow that game. Like, it seemed like it was really, really dicey there for a second. And honestly, like, you kind of like, and this is something that we've been critical of the Bears for a long time, of not being able to get takeaways or generate takeaways. And then you do in a big moment when Logan Thomas, first of all, kind of on him. What are you doing trying to fight for an extra half yard? You're there already. You got it. You're good. But whatever, in the moment, doesn't, know where he is on the field, maybe, whatever. But the Bears are able to force a takeaway, and that kind of flips things around. I think that was the turning point for, all right, this is where you can win the game. And you go and you score points, and you kind of get lucky. But even there, like, if not for that missed field goal by the Commanders, I was fully ready to expect the Bears to lose that game. Like, I was, once the Commanders missed that field goal in the third quarter, I was kind of like, okay, you're probably good.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, it seemed like we were full blown headed to Denver time. And then you're right. I mean, if you had lost that game in that way too, another blown lead like that, I think you're right. I think everyone would have been left behind in Washington, but they weren't. They win. They hang on. They win by 20. We haven't said the final score. Final score of 40-20. You put up 40, which, I mean, how long have we been begging for that too? So a lot of positives for sure. And definitely, like you said, I think a jumping off point, a building block for this season. And I know T3P put in the chat, like, oh, he can't ever have a bad game. He can have a bad game. It's the NFL. I get that. It's the more of the point of, we've seen Justin Fields show these flashes before and then completely regress. If he could put together 2, 3, 4 games and then have a bad game or a mediocre game, fine, that happens. It's the NFL. That's a parity-driven league. But if you're having one really good game followed immediately by an atrocious game, then that's where the criticisms come in. Is that 2 good games right now? Can you make it 3? Can you make it 4? Then you build yourself even more wiggle room. The more good games you have, you build yourself more breathing room for the inevitable bad game. The minute he has a bad game, I'm not going to say, all right, cut him, it's over. And I know that sounds different from what I was saying a couple weeks ago, because it is different. You were losing games in horrific fashion and he was not playing well, but now he's played back-to-back games where he played really, really well, with 2 games upcoming in the next couple weeks to continue that really, really good play and entrench himself as the guy that Ryan Poles and maybe the coaching staff wants to keep around. Because I do kind of disagree, Kevin, where if, let's say we're in this track of, let's say the Bears win 4 of the next 5. Let's say that they beat the Vikings and the Raiders. Let's say they lose to the Chargers, but they beat the Saints and the Panthers. Let's say they win 4 out of 5 and you're 5-5. Now you have a stretch then coming up where that's kind of where you get into the tougher part of the schedule, because then you go Lions, Vikings again, but then Lions, Browns, Cardinals, who've been scrappier, Falcons, Packers. Like, those are winnable games still, especially, who knows what the Falcons will be by then. The Vikings might be full tank mode. The Cardinals may have fully regressed by then. So you could be looking at, say, 8 wins. Like, I think if you get to that 7, 8, 9 marker, I think the coaching staff is safe. I think that then, because especially given how the season starts, then it's like, oh, well, look at the job they did turning this around. You start 0-4, and then you go on to end up, you're 0-4, and then you win, what's the math? You win 8 of your next 13 or whatever, or 7 of your next 13. That's something that's, they turned it around. They found an identity. They found their character, and now we're going to keep the band back together. Because then if you're winning those games too, if you win 8 of 13 or even 7 of 13, like, I think then it shows progress by not only Matt Eberflus, but also Luke Getsy as well. So you start 0-4 and you end up with 7, 8, 9 wins. You can't justify firing the coaching staff. Probably. I could be wrong, but generally in the NFL, like, think about just like, we don't have really a precedent for that. And we know that the Bears aren't a team that's an organization really that sets that kind of precedent.
Right.
The Bears are very status quo.
They are very status quo and, do things the right way, yada, 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 old school stuff. But I think if they don't make the playoffs, they're cooked. I honestly, I think that's where I'm at. I mean, you have to be
you have to frame it as what were the expectations for the year.
I mean, we don't know that though. Like, we don't know what their expectations were.
So that's what we have to consider. What were the expectations in that building? Because you were the worst team in the league last year. So in that building, is it kind of like the Lions where, okay, if you're in the hunt at the end and you miss it by a game or 2, is that acceptable? And you're still, 9-8 or 8 or 8-9, whatever. Like, if you have 8 or 9 wins, is that okay? Is that relative to what your expectations were? We don't know. We're never going to be able to ask those questions, and we'll never get an answer. But like, for me, let's frame it this way. We did our season preview. You had said 10 wins. I had said 7. Now, if they get to 8, that exceeds my expectations. Okay, good. You did your job. You went from the worst team in the league. Literally, you had the number 1 overall pick last year, and then you traded it, obviously, famously. But you went from literally the worst team in the league to a team that was in the playoff hunt and had 8 wins. That's a win. That's a successful season to me, because then in that vein, if that happens, Justin Fields has shown enough to be the guy going forward. Okay, great. Now for you, that is underwhelming 8 wins, let's call it, because you're 2 wins shy of your projection. You probably aren't in the playoffs. And to you, that's disappointing. So I feel like you have to frame it that way. I have a feeling that the Bears weren't expecting 10 wins in a playoff berth. I think they were expecting the goal, like expectations, like ceiling, maybe, sure. Like your ceiling maybe was 10, 11 wins, get the playoffs, cool. But expectations, like let's say you run the simulation 100 times. What do you get 95% of the time? Probably that 6, 7, 8 wins. So that's just what you have to consider.
I just think almost, though, if you get to that point where you're in the hunt with 8 or 9 wins, right? It almost makes the first 4 weeks look even worse for the coaching staff, though, because then you're aware, hey, we have the talent, we have the quarterback, we had all the pieces in place. And what occurred in the first 4 weeks of the season was such malpractice that it's unacceptable that this was a playoff team and this coaching staff was the reason they are not the playoff team. Like, we could get to a discovery point where if they get to 8 wins somehow and they rattle off, 7, if they go 7-5 in their next 12 games, which is not unachievable at all. Mm-hmm. You get to that point and you do a whole season review and you do your exit interviews and everything, and you take a deep dive. If you're Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, you take a deep dive into this team and you think, wow, we did a great job constructing this roster. We did the right thing, not drafting Bryce Young and keeping Justin Fields around. We did all of these things right. Like, we did it the right way. Our coaching staff started the season 0-4. Blew a 28-7 lead against the Denver Broncos, who could end up with top 3 pick. And at that point, I think it makes the coaching staff look worse. And I think if you're Kevin Warren, you're Ryan Poles, like, I just don't, if you're them and you go and you're approaching next season, the thing you fear about firing the head coach is regression, right? You don't want to go backwards and bring in a new head coach and have there be bumps in the road. I think they look at this and say, there's no possible way there is regression from this coaching staff. There's only positive progression if you bring in somebody new. Like, it cannot be worse than what these coaches had been this entire year. And I think they're going to end up looking at it that way. Like, I mean, how many first-year head coaches have won the Super Bowl? Has that ever happened? That's the only thing that might. I'm trying to think.
So here's my thing. Like, at least, because you talk about end of season exit interviews, if they go 7-5 here or whatever, let's even call it 8-4 if you want to get real weird with it, like, then Eberflus, the coaching staff, can sell that they made adjustments. Yeah, we were terrible in those first 4 weeks, but then we found our. How can you say that if you go 8-4? If you go 7-5, 8-4, again, we know what the Bears are. The Bears don't like to rattle the cage. And especially then think of it this way. Do you really want to start over in a whole new system for Justin Fields again?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I do. But obviously I do.
Well, you do, yes.
Of him with Ben
but like
Johnson.
you have to like consider what the Bears do and their historical precedents. They don't do things like this.
I don't know though. Do they?
If Matt Eberflus, well, they did it with Lovey and look how that went. So if you say, okay, if Matt Eberflus walks in and goes, all right, we were terrible. That's on me. But look what we did after that. We made our adjustments. We were able to block out the noise, and he's gonna sell those outside circumstances, the whole situation with the coaching staff and Claypool. And he's like, hey, once we got all that set away, like once we got everything settled down and we were able to, just focus on football, that's when things turned around. That's what they're going to sell. And I think that Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles will buy that.
That's terrifying. I'm sorry. It's terrifying. I don't look, this team, I think, could make the playoffs next year. Like, if they do the right things again in the draft and all that. But I don't know how you could look like, what's the objective here, right? Like, if you're Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, what's the objective? Like, I understand I understand this year, the expectations being, hey, let's improve and let's get more out of Justin Fields. We didn't expect to make the playoffs. Fuck that, right? I said before, you should always be expecting to make the playoffs. Obviously, that should always be the expectation. But if you look at next year, when you have potential 2 top 5 picks to shore up the offensive line and the defensive line or whatever you do. Draft
Well,
Marvin
so I'll
Harrison Jr.,
say
you have a
that
ton of
if
cap
you have
space.
2 top 5 picks, that means that you have not ripped off
Okay, that's
these
a good
wins.
point,
That means
good point.
you've still, then everybody gets fired. Yes.
Top 5 pick and a top 10 pick or something, right? Whatever it may
Sure.
be. Like, you have the opportunity to draft impact players who can actually significantly help the roster next year, and you spend a lot. You still have a ton of money next year to spend in free agency. Maybe you go after an edge rusher, you go after, secondary guy, whatever you need to do. I think you look at that team and then you say, I don't think Eberflus can take this team to a Super Bowl. The expectation at that point is higher in 2024. We've talked for years about, not years, but a year now, about how that's the Super Bowl window opening. I'm sure they have the same exact timeline. And financially and just with the resources they have, it makes sense. And I think they're aware of that. And I just don't, there's no way to know, but I don't know how if you're Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, you look at the coaching staff and you say, that's a coaching staff that can win us the Super Bowl. And that's to me is the reason why I don't think they'll keep him around. But it's a hard argument to make because you're right, and I just don't fear regression because I think again that's the fear. That's still the fear, and that's the logic, right? For organizations who don't want to move on is fear of regression. We saw improvement from these guys. Let's do it again next year. Let's see some more improvement. I don't think there's any way this team could regress next year if they got a new head coach, unless it was a really bad hire. But if you're not a dumbass and you actually, choose Ben Johnson or something, like odds are you're not going to regress. But the system point is fair. I'll pitch this to you. Do they get to a point where the offense is so good for the next 12 weeks and the defense is still so bad and there's still decisions in the game that are still so bad that they fire Eberflus and promote Luke Getsy as the head coach the following year? Like, is that in play? I know we're talking about real big picture stuff, people. I know you came here for Commanders analysis and reaction, but like, this is kind of where we're at here after 5 games. We have to sort of ponder these things, and it's a really, really important case study. And I think that's in the cards. I really, really do. Who do players buy into more, Luke Getsy or Matt Eberflus?
So this is what I'm going to say. I know Eberflus is like the defensive guy, comes from the defense background, blah, blah. I think, and again, this goes back to like, okay, in your exit interview, what can you sell if you're Matt Eberflus at the end of the year? You can sell that you lost your defensive coordinator and not even to a firing. Out of nowhere, you lost your defensive coordinator 1 week into the season. And that you weren't ready to call the plays. You're trying to run Alan Williams' system instead of yours, and you could try and adjust on the fly.
It's the same tree and everything.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's the same tree, but like there's intricacies and certain. And I know Eberflus is in all those meetings and everything, but it's still different. It's still a different set. It's a different person leading that charge. So if you're Eberflus, you can say, okay, hey, I know I did a bad job with the defense, but let's hire a new defensive coordinator, and I'll back off. I'll let that defensive coordinator handle that. That's what he'll be able to sell. I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. No, I think if the offense continues to put up 30, 40 points, I think that, because then that means Luke Getsy has earned our trust back. That means that Luke Getsy has adjusted as well and shown that he's committed to playing to Justin Fields' strengths. So no, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. I don't think it's likely though. Like, I don't think, like, if anything, I think that the reverse is more possible, that Eberflus stays and Getsy goes. Again, that would imply regression. That would imply that Getsy does not continue this formula that's been working the last 2 weeks. That implies that the Bears are continuing to lose games, in which case everybody gets fired anyway. So you're right. I get you're right. This is a conversation that has to be had, because if you're trying to find the way that you can keep Justin Fields and keep all the players, but still somehow get rid of the coaches and maybe keep Luke Getsy, that's a real fine needle to try and thread, and probably borderline impossible, if not completely impossible. So now it becomes, at what point do you just say, screw it, like, we need to, and I don't want to say rooting for losses, but at what point, like, is it if you lose to Minnesota and Vegas, but like the offense still plays well? Is it, like, do you try and do it like last year where, okay, you lose the games, but Justin Fields still plays well and shows you that he's still the guy. But then you get into the dicey territory of, okay, if you're losing games, though, everybody gets fired. New system again. Is there going to be a regression there? Unless you get a mastermind or somebody like Ben Johnson, who you have real good faith in that he can work with Justin Fields. But then it's, okay, is Justin Fields going to be here? Is that guy, the new head coach, going to want to work with Justin Fields, or is he going to prefer Caleb Williams? And it's just a whole thing. We're 5 weeks into the season. You're 1-4. You have winnable games coming up. It's really hard to project these things right now. It's worth having the conversation. And of course, everybody always wants to look at the future, whether that be playoffs or the draft or whatever it may be, which we've covered all of those things so far today. But there's so much more that still we have to find out about this team in the coming weeks. There's still so much more that we don't know, because there's still 12 games left. There's still months left of this season. There's still 4 months, 3.5 months left of the season as it is. And so, strap in. We have, winnable games are coming up for the Bears. 4 of your next 5 games are winnable. And I would argue that the Chargers game is winnable because it's the Chargers and they always find ways to mess it up. So maybe you shoot for 3-2. Maybe, if you want to be like Kevin, you want to shoot for 4 out of 5 or even 5-0. Great. I mean, your fandom is your fandom. You choose how you want to root for this team. I am still very much on the fence. I could be, pushed either way into, all right, root for a tank or push for the playoffs. Because fact of the matter is, you are in that position. You win 4 or 5 games and you end up 5-5. You're right there.
You are. I think what I'm going to do is this, because I will say, I feel like I've been a little bit like too out on Matt Eberflus. Like maybe that's unfair, right? Like maybe it is a little bit unfair for me to be at that point.
I think that you made your bed regarding Matt Eberflus early, because you were already dicey on him coming into the season. Like you believed that he was probably the guy, but you were like kind of, and I think everybody was lukewarm on him because he had his moments last year where he was good and he had his moments last year where he was bad. So it was already kind of like, But after those first couple weeks, I think it was after the Bucs game, you were, Eberflus is not the guy. He's terrible. And I get it, because he had made some really bad decisions. You were completely right to be in that camp. But I think that honestly, you're kind of like me with the team as a whole, where it's like, oh, well, I believed, I was so firm in this belief, and now I'm having a lot of trouble moving off that very firm belief I had 3 weeks ago. And as time goes on, that'll get easier. As time goes on, and if they continue to play better, it'll be easier to say, okay, maybe I was just wrong. Maybe I went a little too hard in this, lane, and now I can switch over to a different lane and be more in the middle or more positive, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. But it makes sense. Those criticisms of Eberflus were very, very rational, and they were very well deserved. Now it's been 2 games, and there's still been some dicey calls. I mean, the field goal, like, he could not have had the field goal unit out there fast enough for that. I think, was it 4th and 3? I think at the Commander, like early in the game, it was like 4th and 3 from the Commanders, like 40, and he could not have had Cairo Santos out there fast enough. They were basically sprinting out there, which is a far, obviously a overcorrection, maybe even from the Denver game, where you probably should have kicked, and instead you tried to ice the game away by going forward on 4th. You didn't get it. We all know how that went. So I'm kind of like how I'm open with Fields. I'm open to Eberflus proving that he can make right decisions and have the team ready to play. There was a lot of extenuating circumstances.
Correct.
Now, Chase Claypool, one of those. I mean, we talked about last week. Matt Eberflus got asked for 6 minutes about Chase Claypool alone. Just Chase Claypool. Why isn't he here? Who told him to go home? Did you tell him to go home? Was it his choice? Was it not his choice? Well, we're hearing this. We're hearing that. 6 minutes on just a guy who you traded for a 6th-round pick, last weekend or over the weekend.
He handled it terribly, but
it had to happen. So now that's gone. Okay. Now, as the weeks go by, you get further and further from the weird Alan Williams situation. You're able to kind of put that in your rearview mirror. So like I said, the same way that I'm open to Justin Fields proving that he can handle this team and handle being the starting quarterback of the Chicago Bears, I'm open to Matt Eberflus, proving that now that you've gotten rid of some of that outside noise and you're able to focus more just on football than literally anything else, I'm willing and I'm open to the idea of Matt Eberflus proving that he's capable of the job. Maybe he isn't over his head. Maybe we were all right, but at least now we're going to get a better idea of it over the next 12 games.
It is often my goal on this podcast to convince Jake Hassan of irrational things regarding this team. I often fail, but today I believe I have been convinced by Jake Hassan regarding this particular matter here. I think now that I think about it, right, and you put more emphasis on the extraneous situation and circumstances, right? With the Alan Williams thing, which is really, I know there's people who want to put that on Matt Eberflus. Don't put that on Matt Eberflus. He didn't know Alan Williams was going to do inappropriate things with the team. He didn't know that when he hired him. You can't put that on him. You can't really put it on Matt Eberflus that Poles brought Chase Claypool in, although it was probably a mutual decision between the two. I'm sure, I would hope at least Matt Eberflus had some say in bringing in a guy like that and hoping that he could turn him into a different player and a different person. But I think now that I think about it, you're right. When you do look at the end, if you go to the end of the year and you do look at that 0-4 start, the conversation, I guess the realization I'm making is the conversation will be directed towards exactly that. Like, it won't be directed towards you blew a lead against the Broncos 28-7. You look terrible in the first 3 games. It'll be, you know what? These outside circumstances played a factor in all of this. Once we kind of got rid of all of them, we're a couple weeks removed from Alan Williams. We bench Chase Claypool. He's inactive. We traded him, and we go from there. And you start to play well without those factors. Then you look at it like maybe those things had more of an impact on the team and on the locker room and on the organization than we initially thought. And I don't think that's an indictment on the organization. I know there's people who say, how do you let those things become a distraction? Well, it's natural, dude. Like, if you especially when it's just building on top of each other, like it was one thing after the next. Like, it was just, we all remember that week, like the week from hell for Hallis Hall, just like one thing after the next is happening and it just can't control the building. Like, those are the types of things that can cripple and can carry over to game days. And we thought that there was a chance they would unite them in a way. And I think we're seeing now that maybe it has. So I think you're right. Like, I'm doing a whole 180 right here. I'm completely flipping.
We're watching it in real time.
We're watching it in real time. Like, I think when you get to that end of the season, if things do continue to look better once those factors have been removed, then you look back at that and say, this was just more significant than we thought. So because of that, I'm honestly willing to give the entire team a blank slate. Square one. The season starts next week against Minnesota. You had a lot of weird shit happen the first 5 games of the season. A lot of unexpected things. You went through hell. You made it out. You got 40-20 win over the Commanders. Clean slate. You're 0-0. You're 0-0 going against the Minnesota Vikings. Let's say you got to go 8-4 to make the playoffs, right? I don't know if 9-8 gets you in the NFC at the current landscape.
It at least gives you a fighting chance.
At least gives you a fighting chance. I'm willing to give this team, this front staff, this coaching staff, this front office, all the players, a clean slate and say, all right, the season starts next week. Can you go 8-4? Those to me are the expectations, and we go from there. So
I honestly, I kind of agree with that. I mean, and it makes sense. Divisional game at home following a big win in primetime. It makes sense for that to be like your, okay, now we go point. Like, okay, now this is where, and I tweeted this and I'm fully expecting this to happen. Let's say for shits and giggles that the Bears go 8-4 over these next 12 games and you end up 9-8. And I'm just fully expecting them at that point to miss the playoffs by a single game. And that'll make entire first 4 weeks that much more frustrating, especially the Denver game, which you should have won. But you're right in that, okay, recalibrate what you're thinking for the season, your expectations. Like, honestly, for me personally, I would even take 7-5 as like 8-9, given how you started, would be a success to me, to be honest. Like, I would take that because to me, that shows, all right, you were able to handle all this all this adversity, all this crazy shit that happened to you, and you're able to turn around and rip off, 8 of your last 12 games or 7 of your last 12
your
games
win total
for wins and go over your win total. But, so it makes sense. I think you're right. I think this game, divisional game, and we'll talk more about this on Wednesday, but it makes sense that is your jumping off point. Like that's where you go, okay, now back home, here we go. This is where you start to make things happen for the season. So that makes sense. I want to just real quick talk about, for once, we can actually talk about our Justin Fields predictions from the previous week with some happiness for once. So for the record, Justin Fields in the game against the Commanders put up a stat line of 15 for 29, 282 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, and on the ground, 11 for 57. No touchdowns on the ground, but threw for 4 of them. So we'll take that. That in mind, I predicted 20 for 27, 263 passing yards, 72 rushing, an interception, 1 passing, 1 rushing. So, not really close, but whatever. Kevin predicted 280 passing yards. So off by 2 passing yards, 24 for 31. We were both off on the completions, 57 rushing yards. Kevin is what he predicted, so you nailed that perfectly. Literally 57 rushing yards, and then a rushing touchdown, which you didn't get, but 2 passing touchdowns. So exceeded expectations. Kevin's apparently is a clairvoyant as far as the yardage totals go. I nailed the rushing total, which is hilarious, and only off by 2 on the passing. So kudos to Kevin for that one. But yeah, I mean, maybe we're looking at the future of the Chicago Bears now, which is an actually fun place to be, and we'll see how it goes. Anything else, Kevin, from the Commanders game for you?
Well, I kind of want to just real quick, as we're talking about Justin Fields and his performance, he's probably going to win, FedEx Passing Player of the Week Player of the Week, and he won't win an NFC Offensive Player of the Week because obviously that award will go to DJ Moore. It would be foolish if it did not go to DJ Moore. But he'll be the Air Player of the Week, whatever the dumb FedEx thing, whatever. It's a cool accolade. Anyway, like after these last 2 games, and looking at the quarterback landscape in the NFC, especially after Sunday Night Football, I think you can start to ask the question of, is Justin Fields the top 5 quarterback in the NFC? And I go through it and I list it out, and here's what I had. I had Jalen Hurts 1, Brock Purdy 2.
Okay.
Wait, I had it. Hold on. Jalen Hurts 1, Brock Purdy 2. I don't know who I had at 3. If it was okay, sorry. Jalen Hurts 1, Matthew Stafford 2, Brock Purdy 3, Jared Goff 4, Justin Fields 5. That's where I'm at. I think at this moment, I know Kirk Cousins is still playing pretty well. You could maybe put Kirk in 5 and Fields at 6, but you could make the argument. It's a debate that Justin Fields is a top 5 quarterback in the NFC. And there's always an asterisk around Brock Purdy because he plays for the 49ers, and the 49ers would probably also be 5-0 if they had Justin Fields, but you just can't really deny what Brock Purdy is doing right now. I think Justin Fields at this moment is a top 5 quarterback in the NFC. And that's a significant thing to say. Like that's a significant realization. And the thing is too, like Jalen Hurts isn't playing that well. Like they're playing well, but like I also don't think the gap between 1 and 5 is that significant. Like I don't think the gap between like statistically, Jake, he's close.
Well, we're also 5 weeks into the season though.
We are,
context
but
matters.
It's almost more impressive because of what he did the first 3 weeks of the season. So all I'm saying is you're on pace to have also Geno Smith is not a better quarterback than Justin Fields. Like we're not going to keep doing the Geno thing. I mean, I don't know. We're not going to do that. But you are in the potential area of having a Pro Bowl quarterback. That's where you're at.
Sure.
And that's
I don't think I'm there yet, but I would hear the argument. I would probably still put, and this hurts me to say, but Kirk probably over Justin Fields right now. Him or honestly, I mean, the way Baker's been playing has been very impressive. So I would hear arguments for one of Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, or Baker Mayfield going in that 5th spot. But you're right. I mean, the argument is there for sure. It sure as hell ain't Dak Prescott after last night. So that guy stinks. And and that team
I
stinks.
got a couple things from the Commanders game that I want to detail since I know we've done a lot of broad view stuff, which is really important, and I know we're 4 days after, so people probably prefer that. But when you just look at the specific things in this game, right? Like I think we undermine, or we have to this point, like the significance of Cole Kmet on this offense. Like
Oh
when
yeah,
Cole Kmet has a good game, the Bears win. Like it is there is a direct correlation between Cole
president
Kmet.
of the Cole Kmet fan club, famously.
Oh, me?
Me,
You,
founding
yes,
founding member.
you founding member, but you've been quiet about him. I haven't seen a lot of conviction from you about Cole Kmet, but now you can really stand on a podium here as the president of the Cole Kmet fan club here. And 5 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Just getting open, making plays. Significant, right? This is a guy who signed to a contract extension. Like, there's a reason they signed this guy to a contract extension. And when you give the guy a ton of money, when you give any player a ton of money, you don't want him to go backwards. You want to show your worth and show your value. You don't want to pull a Joe Burrow, although he had a great game against the Cardinals, and stink it up the first 4 weeks. And Cole Kmet has been absolutely great. So I want to mention that. I don't really have much to say about Darnell Mooney. Wasn't really on him in that game. Let's look at the defensive side of the football. Let's go there real quick, because we saw the takeaways and we actually saw the Bears get sacks. And what we see the Bears do, like, this was a game when we talked, like, I don't know if we mentioned this. I don't think we mentioned this on the preview pod because we hadn't heard the report yet. But then there was that report about Peter King saying Eberflus could lose his job if they lost. And it was at that moment where I was like, I think the Bears, it was after I'd made the prediction, so I couldn't walk it back. I predicted the Commanders to win. But it was at that point I was like, I think the Bears are going to win, because I think Eberflus is going to do anything. Like, if this is truly a job-saving game, he's going to do anything he can to save his job. And from the defensive side, what you saw was they brought a ton of pressure. They're aware of Sam Howell is still as a young quarterback in the league, although he had a ton of passing yards and most of it was in garbage time, just catching up. They sent the dogs, man, and it paid off most of the time. They actually had 4 sacks after having only 2 in the first 4 games of the season. I believe they had 5 sacks. I take that back. They had 5 sacks. They got another one late. You had one from Greg Stroman. You had one from DeMarcus Walker. Yannick Ngakoue got in the mix. Rasheem Green getting in the mix. They had DJ Edwards get a sack on a blitz. And this is what we had been talking about. We had been clamoring for send more pressure. We know your guys up front aren't getting it on their own. We have to find ways to send pressure. They were really creative with some nickel packages and some corner blitzes and just getting, guys in the face. Sometimes with Jaquan Brisker getting in the face of Sam Howell. They did a great job of finding a way to dial up pressure against the Washington Commanders offensive line that's a little bit vulnerable. Get after the quarterback, force Sam Howell to make mistakes, and he did just that. So I want to see that continue. Maybe he's not coaching for his job next week, but it should be the same thing, that same sense of urgency, that same pressure, because we know they're one of the lowest blitzing teams in the NFL in general, and they like to drop back in coverage, and they like to play zone and bring their guys in coverage. But you saw the effects of what can happen when you do send these guys after a younger guy like Sam Howell, and he still gets the ball out quick. It may not have a ton of success against a guy like Kirk Cousins who gets the ball even quicker next week, and we'll talk about that in the preview episode on Wednesday. But I was just really happy to see them dial up some pressure and actually get sacks and get hits on the quarterback and get tackles for loss. That was just such a positive sign after what we had seen was the most abysmal front four that this franchise has ever seen through 4 games. So that was just a huge development for me on the defensive side.
Yeah, and maybe it's DeMarcus Walker and Yannick Ngakoue getting more comfortable, getting finally up to speed. That could be part of it. I mean, Gervon Dexter was all around the quarterback as well, so that's a big development to see from one of your rookie draft picks as well, which is huge. Is Greg Stroman just really good?
Dude, he might just be
good. He might just be good, legitimately. Had the interception. I mean, he had, like you said, had a sack. Had an interception, I think, against Denver, right? Or he had some big play against Denver. He might just be good. And if that's going to be the case, and I mean, this is so far away, and we don't have to have this conversation for a while, but Jalen Johnson's a free agent at the end of the year. And if Stroman's going to be really good, and you believe in Kindle Vildor on the inside.
Kindle Vildor?
Wow. That was weird. Kyler Gordon. Kindle Vildor. Still haunting my brain, apparently. And then let's say Tyreek Stevenson continues to progress over the year. You might have options there. I'm not saying that Jalen Johnson. I'm not saying that at all. But if Greg Stroman's going to be really good, I mean, that's back-to-back weeks where he's made an impression, and he played well at the end of last year too. So he's keeping it raw. So good for him. But you're right. It's good to see the adjustments being made. Hopefully they can keep it up against Kirk Cousins, who you say Kirk Cousins gets it out faster than Howell. Howell's mobile though too. Kirk Cousins is not mobile whatsoever.
Right.
So that, it kind of like evens out, I feel like a little bit, but that remains to be seen. So we'll see who comes back off injury. We'll see the injury reports. We'll
Kyler
talk about
Gordon
it on Wednesday.
Off IR today, just now while we're on this podcast.
Really?
He's been designated to return. Also has Doug Kramer, Jake's GOAT.
But that's has the 21-day window though to officially be activated, correct?
Yeah, right. I mean, like, yes, 21 window, right? Like,
but still implies that maybe he's on track to play.
I think he'll probably play.
Sure.
Yeah, and you saw like cases from around the league, right? Like Cooper Kupp activated off the 21-day window, plays first.
Played immediately.
Right?
Von Miller, another one.
Immediately. Von Miller, right?
Which
Jonathan
Cooper
Taylor,
Kupp,
who wasn't out.
Comeback player of the year. Give it to me, baby.
Really? Wow.
80-1 down to 20-1. But that's a conversation for a different.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really. Okay. That is very interesting.
For a different show.
It is. Yeah, 100%. The Jalen Johnson thing is interesting. That's a guy who's supposed to still get a contract extension. He hasn't gotten it yet. I think you're onto something there. Also, Terrell Smith, dog. I believe he got hurt
another
in
rookie.
the game, didn't he?
Yeah.
He ended up walking.
I mean, who didn't get hurt in that game?
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
My God, it just seemed like everybody was going down. But Terrell Smith with a huge forced fumble.
Yep.
And why am I blanking? Who got the interception? Why?
Stroman.
Oh, it was Stroman. Yeah, we just talked about that. It was Stroman, who's been great. So, and that's the other thing when I talked about this week or last week being the antithesis, right, of the first 4 weeks of the season, Chicago Bears. The major thing that I'm referring to there is, and one of the things that frustrated me most about the coaching staff was not getting the most out of your players. Having these guys at the bottom of the depth chart just be completely exposed. Like, good teams get the most out of these guys who at the bottom of the depth chart, right? And these 7th rounders, like Greg Stroman, a 7th rounder in 2018, and this is a kind of a revenge game for him. He, was drafted by the Redskins at the time, now the Commanders. And you're just getting production out of these guys. And, shouts out to, God, I should probably know who the cornerbacks coach is, but the cornerbacks coach is doing a hell of a job. With these guys, but really across the roster, like Gervon Dexter finally came alive. I know Zach Pickens has been non-existent, but you started to see more plays from guys who, we thought weren't getting developed by this coaching staff, which is another reason why I said I'm willing to give them a clean slate. Real quick before we head out of here, teams that the Chicago Bears are better than in the NFL. Let's create a list real quick. The New York Giants. Yes or no? Yes.
Yes, for sure.
As in the Bears are better than.
Yes.
The Arizona Cardinals. I think the Bears are better than the Cardinals at this point. They have regressed.
I'll still say yes, but it's close.
It's close. The Cardinals are still scrappy, but almost like the Bears last year, like they win a good game against a good team early in the season. Everyone's kind of buying into this, scrappy team. The Minnesota Vikings. I guess we find out next week.
Yeah, I guess TBD.
TBD. Okay, we'll put that up. The Panthers, yes.
Yes.
The Patriots, yes. You want to talk about a dark horse team to get Caleb Williams?
Yeah.
The New England Patriots
might
just bottom out and screw over the NFL and get a good quarterback again. The Denver Broncos, it's hard to say, right? Like you like I still think you're better than the Broncos.
I think yes. I still think yes. I agree.
Who else? I mean, that's pretty much it. You're not better than the Titans or the Texans at this point. Maybe the Raiders. You're better than the Raiders too.
Probably.
But
again,
last
TBD.
week you were the worst team in the NFL, undisputed, no debate.
Yeah.
And now we've just listed 6 or 7 teams that the Bears are better than. That's the impact of one game. Hopefully they can build on it. I'm at the point where, don't get me wrong, man. Last Thursday, I was on my couch screaming and acting a fool like we were 4-0, like there was no change. And you best believe that we've talked ourselves into the possibility of being in the playoff hunt. And we're going to start using that phrase a lot, baby, in the hunt. We're getting back
tweeted
into
it
that
already.
mode.
I was ready for it.
Yeah,
I saw the tweet. I was ready for it.
I will say, Jake, I think I have a problem because Dan Bernstein came in my office the other day and he's like,
"You don't have an office.
No,
you do not have an office.
Shared
Stop
workspace.
calling it your office.
What am I supposed to call it?
You just could say Dan Bernstein came up to me.
Okay, sure.
That's it.
He came up to me
And
and
you don't have an office.
Well, then what is it? Where do I reside?
It's your shared workspace.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say shared workspace for Christ's sake.
Call it a studio. That's what I call this.
I
mean, this is actually a studio,
I guess that's fair. It's sort of a studio. Anyway, he came out to me and he's like, "Why do you love Justin Fields so much?" And I was like, "Well, I have allegiance to Ohio State, but I don't think people understand that a lot of this stuff, like my overreactions on Twitter, is satire. Like, I don't think people understand it. Like, okay, when I tweet, "Oh, the Bears are in the hunt," that's satire. Like, I am not dumb. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. It is. So,
okay, buddy.
I'm all in on the Bears, though. I am. I'm like I said, clean
But it's
slate.
satire.
I'm gonna be this at this point. It's not satire. After the game, it
well,
was, but now we roll. If you win that Vikings game, we're so all the way back, and playoffs are in play. But yes, I will be locked in for that game. We will preview it. We'll do an extensive breakdown of it on Wednesday. RIP Dick Butkus, as Shane McCoy said in the chat. I guess we didn't really give a proper tribute to him.
I was gonna do it at the end, but
okay.
Thanks, guys.
You play the music. What do you?
I was just gonna say on the it's just on the way out. I was just gonna say R.I.P. Dick Butkus, Bears legend, obviously a famously Illinois legend as well. Lived a great life, great football player, great person, great mustache.
Great mustache.
R.I.P. to a real one.
R.I.P. to a real one. It was really sad to see. And am I the only one who the moment that I had learned the news of him passing away,
I knew they were.
I knew they were. Yeah, I knew they were winning the game. Tough spot for the Commanders when the legend of the opposing team passes away. But yeah,
right before the game too, like 2 hours before
2 hours.
Yeah. I agree. I knew immediately they weren't losing that game. So there's your jumping off point, I guess. All right, we will be back on Wednesday. We're going to preview the home divisional matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, who are truly atrocious, a winnable game. We will break it down, the matchups, the injury reports, everything. We'll talk about it. Who knows? Might be the first week that we both predict a win for the Bears. So you have to join us on Wednesday for that. This has been Bears Nation Podcast for myself, Jake Hassan, as always with Kevin Lapka. This has been Bears Nation Podcast. And as always, bear down.